Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, continuing to work their way through spring practice. Tuesday afternoon, we get a scrimmage that, one, sounded to be very competitive for this Florida program, but I think, secondly, gives us a really good feel for who are the names that kind of emerging as difference makers for this program going into 2025. And it's frustrating to hear people talk about Florida, the national media. All they want to talk about is DJ Lagway not throwing. It kind of ignoring some really intriguing storylines that we're seeing kind of emerge for Florida. Want to get into a couple of names and couple of position groups that are kind of growing with optimism as we continue to work through spring practice. Before we do, and as always, to the Florida fans, appreciate you guys. And I think most importantly, y'all let it fly in the comment section in terms of players y'all are most excited about. You guys threw me a massive bone the other week. I was sleeping on Naishawn Montgomery. Coming from Miami Central, I just didn't think that he would be a factor year one as a true freshman. The more you read about spring practice, the more it sounds like I was wrong about Naishawn Montgomery. And I'm not saying he's going to start for Florida in 2025, but it sounds like he could play a role for this offense. And I was sleeping on him. Y'all kind of woke me up on him. Appreciate you guys. That's kind of the best part about doing this. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Fired up to get into it. Without further ado, let's dive in and let's start there at the wide receiver room that it's not necessarily full of names that are proving contributors at the collegiate level. You have J. Michael Sturdivant coming in from UCLA, who has been a guy that has contributed at the Power 4 level. You obviously have a guy like Eugene Wilson as well. Outside of that, it's not a ton of wide receivers that have a ton of production next to their name. The national media kind of sleeping on this position room. And I get it on the surface. There's not a ton of proven contributors in this wide receiver room. What you're hearing in spring practice is that the young talent on this roster, they're going to be difference makers. And to me, it starts with the true freshmen. Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown, Naishawn Montgomery. Dallas Wilson, to me, will be the biggest contributor as a year one freshman. This is the exact kind of wide receiver that DJ Lagway wants in this offense. Big body that works vertically down the field, that can go up and make plays. Look, we talk about this all the time. DJ Lagway throws the best deep ball in the country. We need wide receivers that can go work vertically down the field and go make plays for DJ Lagway. Dallas Wilson is the perfect kind of wide receiver to come in and make an impact. Then you look at Vernell Brown, and with Eugene Wilson, sounds like load management, just kind of trying to get him healthy going into 2025. Vernell Brown's had a lot of opportunity working in the slot during spring practice and in the scrimmage. This kid can play. Now, he might not play as much as Dallas Wilson because he is behind a wide receiver like Eugene Wilson. But Vernell Brown, he's a guy that it's so easy to get him involved in this offense. Get him on the football field. Get him the football in space. Good things are going to happen. And then Naishawn Montgomery, a guy that I didn't really peg as a day one guy. He's emerging as a guy that can make some plays for Florida as well. That's not to mention, some risers in this wide receiver room as well. I think most notably Aiden Mizell. And Aiden Mizell was a guy that we knew would need a year or two before it clicked for him specifically in the SEC. You love the frame, the length that he had. You loved the long speed that he had coming out of high school. There was some weight that needed to be put on his frame. And it sounds like that's happened going into year three of his college football career. Again, not necessarily a starter, but a guy that will be in the rotation and a guy that can make plays for you specifically vertically down the field. I think my biggest takeaway is, one, you needed some young talent to step up in this room. That young talent is certainly stepping up in spring practice. And then I think lastly, what I love most about this room is it's got a lot of diverse bodies. J. Michael Sturdivant, Dallas Wilson, bigger bodied boundary wide receivers that can go up and make plays down the field. That also have some legit speed for that size. Then you have guys like Eugene Wilson and Vernell Brown that are just electric with the football in their hands. You have a guy like Aiden Mizell, Tank Hawkins, guys that are some of the fastest players in all of college football There's size, there's speed, there's playmaking ability with the football in their hands. They're checking off every box you want in that wide receiver. And there's a lot of talent, but a lot of different skill sets as well, which I think is really important when you're looking at what a wide receiver room looks like going into the fall. Stock up on this Florida Gators wide receiver room, which was one of the bigger question marks that we had going into spring practice. Number two, and I guess the last thing I know with these wide receivers, I don't even know if we've seen their full potential. DJ Lagway ain't throwing footballs yet. And so it's like, what are these wide receivers going to look like when they get the quarterback one back going into fall camp? That should excite a lot of Florida fans as well. Number two, the offensive line rotation kind of getting locked down. I think we had a good feel for 4 out of the 5 starters. Who's going to be starting at right tackle. Bryce Lovett started spring practice working at right tackle. I think he's taken this job and hasn't really looked back. And I think that's exciting for Florida fans too, in terms of, hey, we know early what our offensive line is going to look like, which is a stark difference between a lot of other college football programs you see working through spring practice who are trying to mix and match and figure out their best 5. And that shows early in the season when you don't have a unit that's played a ton of snaps together. I think what's special about this Florida offensive line is, one, pretty much returning everybody from the 2024 season, an offensive line that got better. So you have a lot of continuity, but you figured out what your rotation is in spring practice. And so now you can just allow these guys to gel and put it all together going into 2025. We know this is going to be a good offensive line. How good can it be? I think that should excite Florida fans. The second conversation here is you're deep, and you probably found your swing tackle. And what I mean by swing tackle is that third tackle that's not going to start, but is going to come in either on the left or right side if something were to happen. That sounds like it's going to be Fletcher Westphal going into year 2, which, one, should excite Florida fans that he seems to be taking that step from his freshman year. But number 2, this is one of the most underrated positions in all of college football. I mean, I can't tell you how many teams that it's rare to see teams have 2 tackles that they trust. Rarely do they have 3. And so if you do have to go to your third tackle for a game or 2, or even just a drive, a lot of times you see teams bring in liabilities as their third tackle. If you're Florida, you kind of have a trust that, hey, if we have to play Fletcher Westphal for a game or for a couple of drives in a game, the offense ain't going to change much because we got some trust with our third tackle coming on the football field as well. It's a unit that's played a lot together. It's a unit that has gotten better over the last couple of years. And I think lastly, it's a unit that's deep, and you feel good about that depth going into an SEC schedule that's going to be a gauntlet. The rest of the position, I mean, like, we haven't seen DJ Lagway throw. I've been vocal that I'm not too concerned. If DJ Lagway's healthy in 2025, he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. The running back room, I think, should be very, very good with Jaden Bach, Katie Daniels, Jacoby Jackson. You're checking boxes on the offensive side of the football. Now, going over to the defense, I think what excites me the most is what this front 7 can be. And why I say front 7 is, look, this defensive line, although kind of working through some injuries, Caleb Banks working through an injury, Jamari Lyons working to come back after that season-ending injury, George Gumbs working with an injury. That's not even the worst thing for Florida, because you want those reps in spring ball to go to Makai, Dontre Robinson, Stephon Shivers, LJ McRae. And it sounds like the depth on this defensive line is emerging. Look, we know Caleb Banks, Tyreek Sapp, George Gumbs, they're going to be some of the better pure pass rushers, both from the edge and on the inside, that you see in the SEC, because we saw that in 2024. Again, Tyreek Sapp, to me, the most underrated player in maybe all of college football. What does the depth look like on the defensive line? You're starting to hear that emerge. And then I think secondly, and Billy Napier said this in his press conference, what we're most excited about is we got a really good defensive line, specifically in the pass rush. We also got some linebackers that can really get after it in some pressure packages. This was a Florida defense that in the month of November, when they were playing their best football, was one of the better pass rush defenses that you saw in the country. And they just kind of smothered opponents. They were turning the football over. They were creating negative plays. You want to see this defense just kind of take off from where they left off in the 2024 year. There's a lot of reason to believe that's going to happen, because you're pretty much running it back with the whole team that you had in 2024 in November. Pretty much that whole defense is coming back going into 2025, all with the same system that Ron Roberts has, kind of put together towards the back half of the 2024 year, plus some development from some of that depth pieces on the defensive line. Last thing you probably want to talk about is, I guess one more thing when you're talking about the linebacker room, Aaron Childs going into year two, a guy that was stuck behind some really good linebackers last year. Shamar, he's going to the NFL, but guys like Pup Howard and how well Pup Howard played, how well Miles Graham played as a true freshman, Jaden Robinson. Aaron, don't forget about Aaron Childs, because he's that kind of guy as well. This front seven, the defensive line, and the athleticism that they have at the linebacker room, Ron Roberts is going to have a field day. You know that. This front seven, I think, is going to be a problem for a lot of opposing offenses in the SEC in 2025. And then the last thing is a kind of similar to how we talk about with the defensive line, with some injuries that you're working through in the back end. It's allowing your depth to emerge in the secondary as well. You're getting a lot of reps for guys like Greg Smith, Hilton Stubbs, Laganza Hayward, Kermani McLean. Sounds like he's taking that step going into year three of his college football career. I would guess that the starting lineup that we see on our screen, assuming they're all healthy going into 2025, is probably what it's going to be. But you suddenly feel much better about what your twos look like from what you're hearing in spring practice. And that's probably the overarching take I have with Florida. Florida's never had – this is the most talented team that Billy Napier's had, but it's also the deepest team that Billy Napier's had. And it's never fun to talk about depth. It's always more fun to talk about the stars on your football team. This is a freaking deep college football team. And that's important, especially when you play a schedule like Florida's going to have to play in 2025, where you have to have the depth necessary to go out and win games in November. I think Florida has that. They have the star talent, but they also have the depth. And those are the two things that kind of make a great college football team. And I think that's what Florida has the chance to be in 2025. Outside of DJ Lagway not throwing footballs, you're hearing all the right things coming out of this program as they roll through spring practice. We got the spring game April 12th, which I'm fired up about. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.